Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Rachel, welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. I'm super excited to have you on.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks for having me, David.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about a couple of cool things today. I want to share where I just came from and how it relates to the course you taught on Lawline, what you're doing right now, which we're going to get into. So I'm part of YPO, which is, you're familiar, we were just talking about EO. I'm in YPO, it's very similar. And I literally just came from my monthly forum meeting. And what that is it was about 8 of us. We're all entrepreneurs, hired guns in YPO, somebody who's hired to run a big business. And we're there to support each other. And we literally have presentations where the purpose of the presentations is not just about the person sharing, it's what can everyone take away from that? And I know a big part of what you do, and you've taught a course on it for Lawline, is focusing on the inner circle, and specifically the inner circle for women attorneys. And so I'm curious how that approach of what I'm doing, when you think about what attorneys need to learn and lifelong learning, what can you explain a little bit about the inner circle and how it relates to if you believe it relates to the importance of lifelong learning and growth for women attorneys?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm familiar with the program that you're a part of, YPO. And in my first exposure to peer learning was through a derivative program related to the whole structure that YPO is a part of. And as it relates to attorney, so my first experience was as a participant, and I was blown away because I was blown away by the model. This idea that you can put peers together in a room and have a structured conversation, but in that space, there's such safety that's created in that space that you get this window into yourself and your own, not just your own weaknesses and challenges, but your superpowers. You start to see yourself differently. And so I was very moved by that. And that was years ago. But as I went through my journey, my peer circle has always been women lawyers. I always say when you're with women lawyers, you get empathy and strategy. And to me, who else would I want to run with? They're amazing. So we're amazing. So, however, part of the profession is putting on this tough, brave face. And so getting us into this space where people feel safe and can let their guard down and really build trust with one another. The resources that are shared, the way women help one another naturally, all women, not just women lawyers, but women lawyers in particular are very poised to make great change. And so putting women into a space like that where we can synergize and support one another is incredible.
I'll give a plug for your course on Lawline, which is an inner circle, the missing element for advancing women lawyers. And of course, the inner circle applies to what you're talking about right now. And just to step back for a second, how we connected for this podcast today is I was posting on LinkedIn. We have a whole learning path geared towards women attorneys, and one of your courses, this course is in it. And what you had said as a comment on that post, you said something like you had connected with a lot of other attorneys who taught courses, I think, on Lawline, and use that as a way to grow or to connect with them more. And we're going to dive deeper into the inner circle, but now this almost feels like an outer circle in a way, or networking. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm delighted to tell you about that. I actually was shooting off some thank you notes before we hopped on this podcast interview to other people I have met through other Lawline instructors that I reached out to. Right around the time that I recorded my course with Lawline, my deadline was up. And so I was binging all kinds of Lawline courses to meet the deadline and also to learn to learn the range of how to present and how to speak to the camera and everything that you do and that makes a great instructor. I was really curious to see some of the best in the business. And so I watched a lot of my peers that I really look up to. And I met, so to speak, I watched a lot of new instructors. And being a super connector that I am, I reached out to all my favorite teachers and made connection requests and so on, and had conversations with a number of them. One of them, and this is just something I love about networking and this whole concept of interconnection and abundance and so on. One of them, I cannot remember the exact subject matter. I think it had something to do with civility, but their name is Ryan Payton. They head up a justice incubator in Colorado. And we had the most fabulous conversation. Ryan completely understands what I'm building, and I was blown away by what they're doing. My starts were doing some social justice work when I first began practicing as well, a lot of alignment. And excuse me, Ryan and I connected tremendously well, and I'll be speaking to several programs that they're a part of, but also potentially, but also they opened the door to 5 different attorneys in their network, one of which already seems to be becoming a great friend, and another I've been able to give services to.
Well, I can't tell you how much I love to hear that. And by the way, I've heard that time and time again, and not just from faculty, from customers who binge watch. And then, of course, you can get so much from a course, but if you really want to engage, you talk to the faculty member and you become colleagues with them, or potentially mentor-mentee relationship or something else. And it's so great. And so as I'm thinking about like the future title of this podcast, there's 2 areas that come to mind. It's like learning through networking or learning through peer groups. And I'm curious how if I had to choose one, or is there a third name that kind of connects those both together? And so that's the first question. And then as you're thinking about that answer, I just want to make it clear the purpose of this podcast, because it's important for me to keep repeating it for myself and as we keep going. And lawyers and individuals learn by all different ways. CLE is, of course, one, formal learning is one, but informal learning is another. And there's all different types, and peer groups is an example of that. And when I do this podcast, I like to think of one person, one woman attorney who's listening or watching this, who either is thinking about reaching out to other attorneys or thinking about a peer group. And let's, throughout this podcast, keep that one person in mind. So we're talking to her versus generality. So that's all I ask is when you answer, think about that person and maybe actionable things that she can do, whether it's networking or peer groups. So back to the first question, how would you think about the title or some sort of mix of that as we dive into it? And which one's more important? Or it's hard to, obviously there's no one answer.
From my journey the last 2 years, I would certainly say networking, even though peer groups is a main part of my offering. And
wow, great.
Yeah, because peer groups is still unknown. I've spent a lot of time educating the legal industry about peer groups, and I feel like I'm still very much on the front edge of that. Maybe Lawline can be the education piece, and maybe you go the opposite way. I certainly would love that. But also networking is just a much more widely known term. But in terms of, yeah, I can take it in a lot of directions, but I'll pause for a minute.
No, I think no, it's a great answer, and I appreciate it. It's an honest answer because it goes against the core of what you're doing, but you're saying this is what has gotten to where you are. So let's think of that attorney who would like to network more, and from an aspect to grow in the practice. What has worked for you besides reaching out to faculty at law, and what has worked for you, and also how has it helped you grow?
How has networking and other forms of learning helped me grow?
And an easier way to think about it, what's the last thing you learned from networking? I
The last thing,
I
think about this all day, every day. So I'm trying to think of what the audience wants to know and
it's not an audience. It's one attorney.
What this one attorney wants to know about networking. It's everything. We don't have to do it all. And I think in particular, as women, 85% of us are mothers. We got here by being good girls and hardworking students and so on. And so there's this very strong drive to do it all ourselves. Part of the reason for the name of my business, Interconnected Us, which is, of course, not on the nose at all in terms of I could have been old women, courageous women lawyers or something, is that we're all interconnected to one another, even our arch enemy. Everyone's connected in this human family, and all of the abundance we need. And that it sounds so spiritual and ephemeral when I say it like that, but everything we need is out there. We don't have to do anything all ourselves. And I know you're this serial entrepreneur. And so I'm sure you're familiar with Daniel Sullivan's work and Who Not How and books like that. This idea that we don't have to, every resource we need is out there. So if you don't know who, if you need an expert, let's just say a lawyer, practicing attorney that wants an expert witness in a certain area, we don't need to become the expert in everything. It goes way deeper than that.
When you reach out to people, attorneys, what are you generally saying? I assume there's an ask or there's something specific or focused. How do you go about that?
When I reach out to people, I want to get to know them. I want to know where they're at, and I want to know how I can best serve. So the first question I'm always asking is, how can I help you?
And is this generally through LinkedIn if you've never met them before?
Oh, if I've never met them before, a lot of people that come into my world, I meet through introductions,
Okay.
referrals, and so on.
Okay.
So yeah.
Do you ever do cold outreach in order to grow your network? I guess Lawline is an example of that when you reach out to the faculty, or is that the only time you've really done it in that way?
No, I always do that. I don't even think of it as cold outreach. I'm not trying to sell the faculty anything. It's a relationship. I'm beginning a relationship. And I view sales that way too.
Totally.
So everything's, yeah.
So besides Lawline makes sense because you watch the course, but besides Lawline, is there any other specific areas where you've reached out to attorneys that can give ideas to somebody who's watching them? Okay, that will help me. And I guess it depends on what you were looking to learn, but I'm curious if there's anything more that you can think of for someone to take action to.
Absolutely. Just yesterday in my newsletter and in my social media, I posted about building yourself an advisory board. And it's a story that I began telling yesterday, and I'll be telling more over the coming weeks. But starting in June, I was making some changes to my business and I wanted to have more expertise in the room. I work from home by myself, and I wanted to have other people that were just had a much higher, had a much wider lens, a bigger view of the industry and of business in general, people that had deeper experience than I do, that would give me perspective, because I was making a lot of really big strategic decisions, and it was incredible. And I actually created a guide, which is available on my website. Anyone can download, about how to build yourself an advisory board. It's different than a peer group. I'm not competing with myself, and also, of course, in the law line, I go over how to build your own peer group. So those are two different ways to have an intimate group of people who are supporting your work.
What is the right persona or person to build, who's ready to build an advisory board? I guess a first year associate might not be the target.
Right.
So can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So the target person, someone who's ready to build an advisory board, often they are a couple things. Entrepreneur, women lawyers, many defect from practicing and start their own businesses or start their own firms. They stay in the practice, but they start their own firm. Some of them have some very big goals of how they want to make impact in the world. And it doesn't have to be an advisory board of people. First of all, you don't have to be paying them. You don't have to be aiming to sell shares in your company or anything like that. People want to help one another. That is our core human nature, is this desire to be helpful and to help see visions come to life.
Sure. So I understand it. If you're trying to build a business, does it apply to practicing attorneys as well?
I see it as it's practicing I see it for solos and smalls. Those are the ones I see.
Because I recently did a podcast interview with Daniel Gershberg, who's also a faculty, who's been a longtime faculty years back, and he's built his own firm. And I've asked him what he's learned recently as well in the past couple of years. And so much of what he talks about is all the leadership and management skills, and learning to actually stop talking and listen and pausing. And so there's so much soft skills that are there that are important. But yeah, it's interesting.
David, may I add one thing about the advisory board? In addition to solos and smalls, I want to zoom out a little bit. An advisory board can be used for any initiative. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a group that's ongoing for years and years, that's trying to achieve a long range vision plan. It could be, I want to start speaking about XYZ, or I want to monetize my thought leadership on this particular topic, and I'm wrestling with how to do it. And so I'm going to put together a bunch of people in a small space on Zoom or around my living room, and we're going to have a conversation that I'm going to lead. I'm going to give you my vision and tell you where I'm stuck, and you're going to candidly and gently, hopefully, give me feedback about the moves that I am planning on making.
So maybe this is a bad example. Let's say you're a real estate attorney and you're going to an estate planning or some other practice group. Maybe you would want to find faculty on law line or somewhere else who are estate planning attorneys, and reach out to them and share what you're doing and say, would love to have lunches on me, love to get your input on this. I'm building an advisory board of 3 people and it's meeting 3 times over the course of 3 months, something like that. Or can you give a better
Absolutely.
picture? Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic way. That's a fantastic example. Just a way you've got a project where you're stuck and you want to get other expertise in the room. We all know people who are smarter than us and who are complementary to our skill set. And I've got scripts and so on available to help people reach out, because I know it's not intuitive to everyone how to go about making an ask like that, but
Totally.
people want to.
And I'm a big believer whenever if you're in a live room and you're presenting, especially to lawyers, there's more knowledge, of course, on the other side of the room than the one person who's presenting. And I always wonder how to continue to grow on that and build on that. And so whenever I speak in public, I try to facilitate as much as I speak, because especially to attorneys. And I love that everybody who's watching a course, a formal CLE course, can also eventually teach a course, because there's that whole sort of community. And I think that's what's unique about lawyers. Okay, we talked I like to just see if there's anything else we haven't covered, then we can move on. So we were talking about networking, and you said one way to learn through networking is to reach out about advisory boards. Obviously, there's other soft forms of doing. You're just looking, you don't need an advisory board. You can just be looking for a mentor, or you can just admire the person, or they wrote an article and you would love to talk to them and learn more, and through that conversation. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you would love to share with this attorney who's watching, and how they can network to learn?
Absolutely. I was a little taken aback. I published a few weeks ago how I had reached out to Brett Tremblay, who's an EO, or I don't know if you know him. He owns that Staff Dove.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, so I had reached out to him and we had the 1 week later, we hopped on a Zoom call. We had the loveliest conversation. He gave me advice. His business is orders of magnitude bigger than mine is. And he gave me advice I've been looking for 2 years. It was so helpful. It was incredible. And so I anonymized the script of how I reached out to him and published it as a resource to my followers on LinkedIn. And I was surprised because there's a lot of career coaches who engage in my comment section, and they were like, wow, this will be so helpful to so many lawyers. They don't know how to don't know how to reach out, or why would an expert want to talk to little me, that sort of thing. Brett was incredibly gracious and helpful, but also the way I reached out to him is a very it's a process that can be duplicated.
And it's so interesting because it's also by producing content as well leads to more networking. Like, I believe content marketing is networking as well, because if anything, the reason we're doing this podcast is because you commented on my post on LinkedIn, which is a form of networking.
Yeah.
Commenting. And again, I really keep trying to bring it back to the learning component, and maybe to some degree you can make anything fit into that bucket. But I do believe talking to other people, even in this moment, listening to podcasts, is a form of that. So cool. And I think through ChatGPT right now, it's learning on steroids. You Google. So that's the problem, right? You go into ChatGPT, you can start a conversation and actually give me ideas on how to network, to learn, and to grow my practice. And it's just unbelievable. Okay. So we covered that. I wanted to touch on one thing that you talk about in your course, is the epidemic of loneliness in the legal space, and especially for women lawyers. And I'm curious how you think that affects an attorney and their ability to continue to grow professionally.
Experiencing loneliness, how does that affect their practice?
How does it affect their practice? And just if you can share sort of your, what you've said on that before.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if I'm I researched what I've said before, but I'll tell you what's live now.
Just off top of your head.
Experiencing loneliness, anxiety, a lot of these these states that we all go through is a form of scarcity thinking. When I say that, what I mean is, of course, we're focusing on the glass half empty, not the glass half full, but there's like that Native American tale. You've got two wolves. Which one are you going to feed? So taking proactive steps so when we are deep in that feeling of loneliness, which is a normal life experience. So there's listeners here who might be very deeply depressed and feeling very isolated, but there's a path out. And practicing gratitude, rewiring your mind, getting into certain communities, self-care, and protecting that as part of your health, just like you need sleep and nutritious food and so on. You need socializing. You need a break from computer work and so on.
Yeah.
That has a tremendous impact on our practice, on your practice or your life and your life.
And I think it's just the reason I brought it up. I think especially now we can all relate to that in one form, or everybody can relate to it in one form and another, especially if you're working remote, which actually all Lawline does. And it's important to your energy that you feel affects your ability to grow. And I think, again, the theme of this podcast that we're talking about, it's about learning with others, learning within your community, whether it's through networking or through your peer group. And I just wanted to point that out because the more you can reemphasize, it's easy to connect, or easier than you think. It's an opportunity to learn from somebody else. And so that's why it stood out to me. And then I'm going to really push. So while you did say learning through networking is important, and more maybe the title, for me, I was in EO for 17 years. And so I've had a lot of experience in learning through peer groups, learning through experience share, whether it's a smaller group or something else. And I think it's such a great thing that you're doing. So I want to give you a little accolades there, but tell us, before we get into that, tell us about, you're an entrepreneur, right? And so tell us, what are some of the things that you've learned? Tell us a little bit about what you started. What are some of the challenges or the things that you've learned as you're trying to launch this really great initiative?
Thank you. So hard to shorten it to podcast length. There's so much I've learned. We only learn by making mistakes and doing. So I can tell you this, the first group I launched, we did not, despite all the materials I had from previous experiences and from Mo Fathelbab's fantastic book.
Which book?
Oh my goodness, it's just across the room out of my eyesight. And then with a black strip. It's like the Secret of Successful Leaders, the forum, or something along those lines. Mo Fathelbab's book. He's one of the co-founders of EO, to your listeners, and a wonderful mentor. Okay. Ironically, despite reading his book, despite having a law degree and so on, the first group I launched, every group I launched, including the betas, pushed back. We don't need rules. We can just jump right in and get started. I say it now, and I still feel like the shame and the horror. How did I not show more leadership and demand that together need rules?
Yeah.
Now I don't want to go into a space without rules. And if we're going to go forward without guidelines, I'm going to wave the yellow flag and tell you all the reasons why I'm very nervous about that. So I don't like a lawless land.
Any other mistakes come to mind? I love talking about mistakes because hopefully areas where you learn from.
There's so many. It's more the reality that inside my brain, I'm sorting the mistakes for what's most helpful to your audience. I think one of them that was a huge mistake that I'm just now correcting. One of my superpowers, so to speak, is this like visionary creative side. And at a real pinnacle of my business career, before I launched Interconnected Us, I had achieved the greatest heights, and then I was shamed and fell for being a visionary. And a visionary can also be called a dreamer and so on. And that gave me a very fraught relationship with one of my greatest strengths. And so just now I'm understanding how to explain it to others in a way that I'm taken seriously, and a way that my credentials are really clear and so on. But that's very personal. That's a very personal share, but that's really going to resonate with the one person I'm speaking to who is a visionary too.
I am as well. And I think it's actually very common for entrepreneurs. There's a really good book by the people who started EOS. It's called Rocket Fuel. And I'm sure maybe you've heard of it. And it's about a visionary integrator. And every great business usually has the dreamer and then the operator. And essentially one of the things that we implemented at Lawline maybe 6 years ago, as well as we implemented scaling up and we hired a coach. We worked with a coach for 7 years or 8 years, and it completely transformed the way we run the business. And so I completely understand all the different pieces like that. Somebody who's not so familiar with how a peer group works, can you take them through what a typical session is for one of the peer groups or advisor? What do you call it? A peer group, or you call it or you call it a circle? You call it a
I use the
circle.
word inner circle mastermind.
Okay, let's use
That's
it.
what I call it right
So-
now. Inner
so-
circles.
I like it. So take us through a typical, is it a full day, a half day?
Yeah,
And-
no, but I do it on Zoom. I'm sorry, go ahead. Did I interrupt you?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, so the meetings are an hour and a half. We meet on Zoom. We meet twice a month. I bring women together with others where they work in a similar work environment. So let's say big law, junior partners, and so on. You come into the space, presuming it's not the first meeting, we've all met each other and so on. You come into the space,
many
everyone goes
people?
around. What?
How many people are usually?
Oh, I aim for around 8.
Okay.
Six to 8 is what I like. I do not want, there's some other businesses out there that will put, 12 or 15 people in a room, and that doesn't
Yeah.
sound
Okay.
good to me at all. 6 to 8 people with a facilitator, unlike there's, a half day or a full day training where you learn how to run the group yourself. And I began that way. That was another mistake. Women lawyers do not want to take a half day or a day to sit on Zoom and learn how to run something that they could outsource. And so there's a professional facilitator who's charged with guiding the conversation, making sure that the space is protected, that everyone has equal airtime, and so on, and that the rules are followed, of course. In the space, though, the structure of the meeting, we begin with updates, what's going on, what do we want to celebrate? Very important to always be celebrating your wins with your inner circle, because that helps rewire your brain. It's just like practicing gratitude. Celebrating wins and saying what you're grateful for is not meaningless fluff. You rewire your brain neuron and you keep it strong and healthy, neuron by neuron, action by action. That's very important. But then we go around and we share what's going on that we might need help with. And the group, usually it becomes readily apparent. There's no need to vote or put it on a board or whatnot. I know certainly in EO and other organizations, there's more of a structure, and I've toyed with that, but so far that hasn't been necessary. It becomes pretty self-evident which issue is both urgent, but also is relevant to everyone else in the space. And then that person presents. There's an opportunity where they're sharing about their challenge. Everyone has an opportunity to ask them questions. And then we go around and we experience share. And I'll pause there. That's pretty resonant with you. I think there's a couple departures, but
by the way, a formula that works is one that works. So you keep with that. And so I'll say one of the biggest takeaways I got from EO is the power of experience share, because when you give advice to somebody, what happens is you end up putting them on the defensive, especially you're like, I would never do that. You got to fire that person tomorrow. I would have fired them 10 minutes ago versus, and it's challenging because sometimes you try to give advice and experience, but versus I had that problem with my COO. And we worked for 6 months together with a coach and did everything that we tried didn't work. So eventually I had to fire my COO, and that's what I did. And you leave it there. And I think the power of that, then it's not about you telling them what to do, and they can absorb that. So I'm glad to hear you do that. My question is, how did you end up on the time frame of an hour and a half? Because as you probably are aware, that's not a lot of time with 6 to 8 people in the room and to dive deep, but I'm just curious the balance of everyone's busy versus finding the right amount of time to dive in deep.
Yeah, it was trial and error, and it was speaking with a lot of very supportive colleagues who'd been in somewhat similar, bringing together groups of women lawyers. There's a number of barriers that all lawyers have, but that women lawyers have even more. And certainly, of course, our time is very valuable. It's hard to sacrifice it, especially at the front end. You don't know the value yet until you've experienced it, but also we meet on Zoom. That lets me diversify the groups a lot more than if we were live. And there's an upper range of how long people want to stay on a Zoom call and then go to a day worth of computer work. So I have to be sensitive to that.
Totally. And what's your vision? Give me 3 years in the future. You're looking backward, right? What does it look like? Or 12 months, 12 months, or just, I don't want to put a challenge, but just tell me your dream. Like, where would you like to see this? Because how many groups would you like to see it in person? Would you like to see more learning events and build your own sort of entrepreneurs, like we've done with entrepreneurs within women attorneys. Just love to help you put it in the universe, because I believe the law of attraction is true. As I'm sure you've seen in your life. So to attract those who are interested in being part of that.
I really appreciate that. It's someone like, if you took in a perfect world, the really grand vision, somewhat marrying EO. And if I'm really going to be very open book, it's also looking at Oprah's business, where they're subject matter experts. She's anointed people in certain areas that come in and add a ton of value to her network and her viewership and readership and so on, with all the different areas that they complement her message. So that's really exciting to me. I also love how she's multimedia.
Love it.
I really love that.
And
So I would love live events. I would love a podcast one day. I have all kinds of things I would like to do.
The podcast is easy. Just reach out to people and start talking. Are you still practicing law?
No.
Okay.
No, I stopped very early on. I got into the business world.
Very, very exciting. And because that's a big leap of faith, right? Like to be able to do that full time. What I'm trying to see, and we'll see if you have any towards the end, I wanted to see if you had any questions for me. Obviously, I have delved in this area a lot, and both law and anything else. And is there anything that comes to mind? And if not, that's totally fine too. But I just want to give you an opportunity to put on the interviewer hat to see.
Sure.
Help.
I have three. Three. Yeah. One is this is more tactical about peer groups. So when I bring women lawyers into a space and I share about experience sharing, we don't give advice, we share experiences. Have you been in a peer group of all lawyers, first of all?
No, because I've never practiced, but I have had lawyers in a peer group, but I've never been all lawyers.
Okay. So here's what has happened for me multi times. The lawyers all push back. They have no problem pushing back. And they all tell me rule comes from the patriarchy, or that rule, there's all kinds of reasons why that rule is a non-starter, and why. And what I'm realizing is I'm speaking to people who are professional advice givers. That is literally what we do. And so
the rule of experience share comes from the patriarchy. Yeah.
Well, there's all kinds of ways people have pushed back, but Gestalt is it's a huge challenge to lawyers. And when they first come into my space and are challenged to speak that way, as it is for all of us, to learn to just share experiences. But I'm asking in this moment, if you could give me advice.
Yeah.
I would love your advice.
Well, I'm going to share my experience. I know, but so I've been so trained on that. So one of the things that, for better, or for worse, is when someone's in a room in that situation, and entrepreneurs challenge facilitators all the time, what they say is trust the process. Like, just trust the process, see how it goes. If it's not for you at the end of this, or you really still don't like it, or you think I'm wrong, maybe it's not the right fit or whatever. And so that usually works, at least for that moment and things like that. And so I would say that's one. In terms of the patriarchy, I would have to better understand what that means. Because for me, somebody sharing their personal experience is the most valuable thing that I've ever. That's essentially what a podcast is. When you share things in generalities, it's challenging. And when you give advice, I can tell you it's always biased. It's always, and generally, especially if it's advice that's, when you put somebody in the defensive, it's bad. So like, that's in this short thing. If somebody doesn't want to trust have you said trust the process out of curiosity?
No, I love that though. That's a brilliant way to say it. Thank you.
Sure. I just copying other people. Give me number two.
Hit it out of the ballpark. Number two.
I don't expect to hit this one out. So let's.
Would you be open to hearing more about my advisory board off camera?
Of course.
Okay, because I would love to have you drop in.
Absolutely. So let's just give me 30 seconds. What does that mean? What is your advisory board?
Sure. So my advisory board is a number of industry titans and executives that meet once a month. It's 45 minutes long. The intention is quick in and get out. It's a 3-month. Every 3 months, I ask for a renewal. I just went through my first renewal, so I'm in my second 3 months.
I love that you asked me this, because this actually makes it more real. Because like you said it before, and it's okay, whatever. And so like when you just said that, you just sparked something in me. I'm like, I want an advisory board. I don't have one. And so you said, so take us through that a little bit. It renew because it's a big ask,
You were there.
but it's a big ask to ask somebody to meet with no pay for just the value, and it's virtual or in person.
Virtual.
Okay, so were you asking me if I want to be part of it, or you're asking me?
Yeah.
So, all right. So can you go? Can we do this for right now? So
Let's do this. What do you
what-
mean? I don't even know what you're asking. Yes, let's do it. I think we already did it. But
no, but like you said, can we talk offline? Let's talk now. So tell me, okay, obviously the answer is yes, because to me, that's a great opportunity to learn and things like that. So what do I need to do? What happens at this meeting?
I love it. You'll hear from my staff. No, I'm just kidding. I will send you, let's see. Process is thus. I will DM you when we meet. You will let me know if really the process is even easier. I will add you to the invite.
But what happens at the meeting?
Oh, what happens in the meeting? I connect everyone with one another. So you'll be new. So I'll introduce you and you'll meet the
That's
board,
a benefit.
which are amazing. Yeah, they're amazing. And then it's very quick. It's a 45-minute meeting. So pretty quickly I launch into what I've done in the last month and then open it up for discussion and questions and often loving critique.
And then people share their experiences or advices or whatever.
I don't ask them to do
Whatever,
it in the structure of experience sharing, but yeah,
whatever they want to share.
Here's what I think, here are my concerns. As an example, just as one example that I'll be open book about, I post from time to time some anti-racist stuff. It's a passion of mine and it really disturbs me about this world. Someone on the board said to me, how's Big Law going to feel about that? Was it a very interesting question? If I'd say something that's divisive or provocative, not everyone's going to, have I thought that through? They weren't saying don't do it, but they were just saying, does this go against your business goals? Is this something, how do you feel about that? And it was a challenge.
I'm glad to hear that, because what's important, especially for an advisory board, I would think, is you want someone who's going to ask you a tough question and actually disagree with you, because especially on a topic like that, it's too easy just to be like, no, I don't want to talk. Like, okay, whatever. Like it's a challenging topic. And for me, one of the things I try to do as much as possible, and it's tough in this world, is have open discussions with people I disagree with. And it's really challenging now, but that's at least I have a lot of friends and colleagues that we disagree in certain areas, and I love to ask them questions, like the same thing we're doing here. So cool. I think that's great. And then my one question to you, what is it, just so others can see, obviously we don't know each other that well, you know, that why would you think I would be a good person to be on the board? I just want to hear good things. No, but seriously, what was there something that standed out? Was it just law line? Was it EO? Was it something?
Oh, no. Yeah, of course. No, like that amazing conversation I had with Brett Tremblay, you have a really high bird's eye view of the legal industry. That's number one. Number two, I would love to write a book one day. You've written a book. Number three, I'd love to get into EO. You've been a statewide leader in EO.
Yeah.
Right there is three.
Awesome.
Before I can go on about our interactions
keep
and
going,
so on.
keep going.
Yeah.
All right, and question number
Write
three.
your bio.
You still remember number three?
Speechwriter. You want the third question? The third question is, would you like to hear an idea I have about Lawline?
Would love to.
I think it would be super cool to have some sort of elite faculty experience where the faculty can bond with with other faculty, or be invited to a faculty only conference, or have some sort of cool faculty badge, or because every lawyer who takes a law line, right? We all have a doctorate in persuasion and public speaking and so on. They could all teach a law line, like you said. So it'd be so cool we've made it to the faculty side of the aisle.
It's so interesting because I've been doing this, it's crazy to say, 17 years. And you ever see the movie The Matrix?
I've not, but I feel like I quote it. I don't know. Go on.
You haven't seen The Matrix?
No. Yeah.
You know what it's about?
I know Keanu Reeves stars in it.
You don't know what it's about?
No.
That's actually the best way to watch it. So
Okay.
I don't even want to tell you.
I feel like Special Brownies might be the best way to watch it.
No, you don't need it. Just
Okay.
you don't need. I went into it not knowing what it's about, and it will blow your mind. But essentially, without giving away the movie, let's just say though, every generation, the world starts over from scratch. And to some degree, I feel like Lawline has gone through 3 to 4 or 5 versions of the Matrix. And why the reason over 17 years, a lot of things happen. So earlier on in the first 5 or 7 years, I was, and I first of all, the answer is 100%. I agree with you. And what we did originally, we had yearly faculty events in person. We had them at the Harvard Club. We had them at restaurants, and they were great, and they were really expensive. The challenge was it was really hard to get a lot of people to show up, just because it's just challenging. And we had lifetime achievement awards that we did for faculty. We even had a faculty badge at some point, and I think that maybe one time we updated the site and it's gone. And we actually one time had awards for faculty. I'm agree, and we started at one point maybe 10 years ago or whatever, version 2. We started doing some breakfast for faculty, and I agree with you. And I think there's a couple things that I think about is that's one. Number 2 is this happens so often informally, where those who watch courses reach out to faculty. I wonder if there's some sort of more formal way to have faculty hours or faculty groups.
Oh, I love that.
Or conversations that add value to the faculty as well as those who are watching. To at least, one of our core values, we just changed it this year, and it's always been this, but we made it a core value, is experimentation. So we're constantly trying new things. And one thing that you may not even know that we have that we launched and we're experimenting with it is on all the courses now, we have an AI learning assistant. And so on your course, you can go on there and ask it questions, and it will help summarize your course and things like that. And that's how I was able to get some insight. So take a look at that. And it's just from the course, and it's on the course center. But so the answer is yes. And the challenge that we have is, what do we start with?
Yeah.
And how do you get the best bang for your buck? Where is it badges? Is it events? Is it doing this? But I agree. I think there is something unique and special about being a Lawline faculty member. And many of them do it. Once you do it, you get hooked, and there is a community there. And the other thing that we try to do a little bit, but we have a directory where faculty are on, but customers also can opt on to be on. There is I would love to build a stronger faculty community, and maybe it's breaking it out into different practice groups or different areas, because there's 2,000 faculty now. That's a lot.
That's a tremendous accomplishment. Wow.
That's a lot. Our program attorney I don't know who you were. Do you know who you worked with? Was it Gabby?
Of course. Yeah. Gabrielle. Yeah. Gabrielle. Yeah.
So they're just the best in the business.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, there's a lot of great program terms out there, and we just really care about finding attorneys who want to give back and be part of that. So I'm going to lean into you a little bit offline too. Maybe there's a way we can leverage what you're doing. What if we can informally create for free a faculty circle?
Yeah, I was thinking of something similar. I was thinking, I bet there's this is what I mean about the visionary creative part, like all the different dotted line paths between Lawline and Interconnected Us. I can think of 4 of them.
Yeah. The things areas we have not really approached from a learning perspective is both peer groups, and the other one is coaching, in-person, virtual coaching, or just live coaching. And one of the reasons is it's hard to scale that coaching component. Either you outsource it or you have coaches, or it's from, if you're a one-person coach, it's easy, but like from a business model standpoint, it's hard to do. And the third part is there's so much energy just to create continuing legal education programs. Everything you decide to do that's not your core, you either have to stop doing something you're doing or hire somebody new to focus on something else. Every time you try to take somebody and say, okay, now spend 30% of your time on this and 30% on that, it might happen, but it's going to take a long time. So we'll take that offline. I appreciate that suggestion. I'm going to add that now to my interviews. Give me a suggestion for Lawline, even if you're not a customer. We went way over, but I think here's the deal. When we both learn during a podcast, I think other people will too. I really appreciate you coming up with 3 questions. You asked me on your rights group, and you shared, I'm going to tell you, Rachel, you shared a lot of great information today.
Thank you.
And thanks to AI, we're going to be able to, the goal, there's a great tool called Descript, and you take the video, you put it in there, and I guess this is how they do it now. It's able to take clips based on what the AI thinks are interesting parts and put that into for social media. And it does it all, things that would take a day or hours and hours to do, it does it automatically now. And so what our goal is to do, because to get more people to see, they don't have to watch a full podcast. They can see a 2-minute clip where you're talking about a peer group or something like that. So I'm really excited and hopeful to see how that goes. And I love the startup feel, and that's why I'm doing a podcast, because Lawline, I still think of as a startup. This is actually something that's a little bit outside the box. So thank you for being part of it.
I love it. I love it. I love the courage and creativity, and however I can support you, throw my hat in the ring for your advisory board. Hey.
Yeah, you got it. The last question is, do you have somebody that you can think of, if not offline, who you think I should interview, who, when you think of themes, somewhere where it's like a different, something where you're like, oh, that person would be great to talk about learning in a certain area?
Absolutely. I will give you names offline. I can think of too many. That's my problem.
I love it. I'll take them all. All right. Thank you, Rachel.
My pleasure.
Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.